Alright, what's up guys? This is the second video in this little tutorial series that I'm doing for you guys. And in this video, we're going to be talking about, like I said, key bindings. So there's three main things that I want to talk about when we're discussing key bindings. The first is going to be your actual hardware, so your mouse and your keyboard. The second thing I want to talk about is the actual key bindings that you're laying out, why you should put them where they are, and having them consistent over each style of game that you play. And the third is going to be if a key binding allows you to not have other key bindings to do the same thing, obviously you don't want to have those key binds bound, and I'll explain all of this in more depth. So the first thing, like I said, we're going to be talking about is hardware. So why is hardware important? Well, it's not really for keyboards because most keyboard layouts are the exact same, but for a mouse, mice are different. Mice have buttons on the left, buttons on the right, buttons on top. They can have buttons everywhere, and this can give you a crazy advantage over someone who doesn't have buttons on their mouse. And here's why. Because not only can you bind special abilities to your mouse, or other abilities to your mouse that they can't, they may have to take their left hand or their right if they want to completely remove it from their mouse, to take that time to press that button that they're pressing when you don't have to. And those seconds, those split seconds add up, especially in gunfights. It matters. So here's what I always do whenever I have just installed a game, especially a battle royale or first-person shooter game. I come in and I read all of the key bindings, and the first thing I do is I say, okay, am I playing, for example, Apex? This is a battle royale style game. So in every single battle royale style game that I play, I always have the same key bindings for the things that are going to be in every single battle royale. So for example, you need to look in your inventory. You need to open up your map. You're going to have to move. You're going to sprint. You're going to be crouching. All of those things are standard in a battle royale. So I always make sure that they're consistent over every single battle royale. That way I don't have to think about, okay, well, what button is it for this game? Because that takes time, and I don't have time to be thinking about those things in a gunfight. I need to be focused on who I'm shooting at and what the situation calls for, whether or not I have a down teammate, or whether or not we just knock somebody and who I need to focus on next, etc., etc. So that's why you should always keep your keybinds standard for the style, standard over whatever style of game that you're playing. Here are my keybinds, and I'm showing you these now slowly. If you need to pause the video, feel free. And I'm going to show you why I have these bound to what I have them bound as. So those are my key bindings, and you probably noticed that I've changed up quite a lot. So for me, I don't remember what the defaults for these are, and I don't want to restore them because I don't feel like going into it. But I know for me, going back to the hardware, my mouse has two buttons on the side of it, two additional buttons. So that will give me an advantage over someone who doesn't have those two buttons, just because I can have bound whatever I want to on those two buttons. Now, if you do have buttons on your mouse, you want to make sure that what you're putting there is going to help you in a gunfight. You don't want it to be some pointless, some pointless button that you don't need. That if you have time to press it, then you have time to press it. But if you don't have time to press it, like something that's not situationally instant, like when you're in a gunfight, split seconds matter. Like a map key. A map key is not something that's important in a gunfight. When are you ever going to pull up your map while you're in a gunfight? Like, that's just silly. You wouldn't. You're going to want things like healing abilities, maybe your tactical ability, might be even like throwing a grenade or punching someone, something that's going to help you fight your opponent better than them fighting you. Obviously, gun skill, that's a whole other subject again, but you want to be able to press more buttons potentially and in a faster amount of time than your opponent can. And here's why. Because if you, for instance, for me, I have my we'll call them button 4 and 5 because that's what they look like on here. My fifth button is my tactical ability. I'm going to be using tactical ability a lot in and out of gunfights. I play a lot of lifeline, so if I need to go run past my teammate and drop them the drone, I can literally keep sprinting and running and not have to take my fingers off of the WASD keys and drop them a drone. I can just run past them and just keep going or stop behind them or do whatever I need to do because I have that bound to my right key. So I can literally be in a gunfight shooting at someone and drop my healing ability. Obviously, it's going to make me stop shooting at them because it's going to have that animation, but I can do that without having to take away from WASD, so I can still move side to side or front to back if I'm getting shot at while I drop it. I don't have to take the time to not press WASD or whatever key that you have that bound to and lose time and potentially be a sitting target for your opponent to shoot at, because in every shooting game you want to always be moving. You never want to be sitting still like this in a battle royale style game because you become an easy target. So that's personally why I have my tactical ability on, and also the health item, because that's obviously going to be super important in fights as well. So that's what I typically try to keep standard on my mouse buttons. That's just me. Those are some things to think about in those types of situations, but you want it to give you some sort of an advantage in a fight, not like, oh, I just want to open my inventory easier because I don't like, you know, using it on my left hand. That does nothing for you in a game like this. It has no value. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is buttons that take up a keybind that prevents you from having to use other keybinds. So for instance, in Apex, this is a perfect example. You see here, if I press down my middle mouse button, it pings. Well, obviously, originally, there are a lot of ping options that I could have bound to keys, but there's no need for it, because if I were to, let's say, look at an enemy with my mouse, if I had the precision to put my mouse over a target or over an enemy and then I ping, Apex is smart enough to say, that's an enemy. Let me throw up the enemy ping. I don't even need to have a enemy here ping bound to anything. I know a lot of people have keys bound to this, and that's crazy. It's so unnecessary. That's just taking up an extra keybind, and you could be using that keybind for something actually important. So these are just some little things to be thinking about whenever you're mapping your keybinds. Obviously, it is going to be dependent on your setup and your hardware, you know, what buttons you do have available to you. But this is just a general guide to, you know, of a way to think about how you should be creating your keybinds whenever you're playing these types of games.